What's up, everybody? Once again, it is I, James, coming to you from the Nerdy Mewzings podcast studio. I'm excited today to be joined by Dan of DansXmenComics. I'm guessing this guy likes the X-Men a little bit. We'll get to that. We'll find all that out. Dan, how you doing tonight?
Got pretty good, James. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. I gotta say right off the bat, I was trying to scratch my head and remember like how we got connected, and I actually think it was a stream that Colossus Collector and some other people were doing for the holidays. And I won Mike from Lunch Money Comics portion of the raffle you guys were doing.
Oh, killer, yeah.
Yeah. And what I thought was really cool was you and like Ryan and a bunch of people who were on the stream, you all reached out to me to make sure that I got my info over and made sure I was paid out my raffle, which I thought was really neat of you guys to just ensure that, you know, there was actually a raffle going on and I was going to get what I won.
Sure, yeah. Like it was probably the first time any of us had done something like that. So it was, we just wanted to, somebody had to be on top of it. But nobody had, put forth the, had said officially who would go for it, right?
Well, it was cool. Like that was the first time I've actually won a raffle of like anything in my life, kidding. I think. So that was really neat. And Mike hooked it up. He sent me a bunch of cool stuff. So that was really cool. Really good stuff.
For you, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously the name DansXmenComics, we got to talk about your love of the X-Men. How did that all get started? Were you one of these kids that came up in the 90s on comics and X-Men was your favorite thing? That's the Cliff Notes version of it?
I mean, I am the typical, right, 90s kid that came up on X-Men just like that. It was the cartoon, that brought me in, and really my friends introduced me to the cartoon. Around that time it was all about Pogs or like Marvel
I remember
cards
Pogs
and stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess the cartoon was just one of the first cartoons after school that had a bit more of like a heavy tone. That and Batman around that time, and I think the thing that really got me hooked onto comics was that my friend would show me that some of these comics actually had value,
Right.
So same thing with cards. Like it was just cool to have a collectible, like a toy kind of, that actually had value, like that an adult would see as valuable. So that kind of just got my interest going. And so the first book I picked up that I can really remember, aside from some of the independent stuff or like Dark Horse comic stuff that I got from my brother, because he was kind of a casual collector at the time. But it was X-Men 1, the Jim Lee. And I think
I got about 40 copies down in my collection.
Oh, dang, yeah. Well, you're beating me. It was probably around issue 19 or something like that. It was further along in that series. So it was complicated for me to understand, to catch up on that story, because in my mind, it was just the show was X-Men, and this was, I imagined it was supposed to mimic the show. So I thought it was a little strange, jumping in, even at issue 1, not understanding who Psylocke is and things like that.
Yeah.
But eventually, and then, more confusion later as I started to realize the Uncanny X-Men was another title that was also coming out in the 300s or something around that time.
Yeah.
So it was just really hard for me to grasp as a kid. And so I would just kind of collect whatever I saw looked cool, or whatever was on the comic rack at 7-Eleven or whatever, or at my comic shop in Eugene, Oregon at the time.
Okay, you were down in Oregon.
Yeah.
Not too far from where I'm at now.
Oh, okay, right on. Where are you at?
I'm up here in Washington State.
Oh, okay, right on. Yeah, I'm in Portland now. So
there you go.
Don't move. It's kind of the natural
Yeah.
migration pattern for most of us there.
Yep.
But yeah, like eventually I just um kind of like I always had X-Men in my heart. But I never really grasped what was going on in the modern era. And that's probably still true today. I've given a few different reads, but never really hung on tight. And around middle school, high school, when I dropped out of collecting comics or being interested in comics, it was still an interest of mine, but I never really pursued it or like went and collected much after that until around my 20s when the X-Men movie came out. So I was definitely like just hopping on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
And that's when I amassed most of my collection. Um, and and then I started to actually do the work to figure out, okay, these are the characters that I love. When did they first come on board? I want to start from the beginning of their story. So that's what Giant Size X-Men and that new team.
So
So
you started to become a little more of a completist and do your research and try to dig
yes,
into all the varied arcs and storylines that's like coming into it late. It's like you get over your head really quick trying to get into all that.
for
There's
sure.
so much content to consume.
Yes. And not a lot of like help. So this was what in early 2000s. So the internet wasn't fully, written out yet. You didn't have all of the resources we do now to understand where to start or what's going on or hear other people's opinions about what they think you should read or collect. So I pretty much just would get whatever I saw, still, but in that range of wanting to collect, from 94 and the plan was just read it all and come out with uh, a better understanding of the X-Men story. But that continued to prove very challenging.
Near
And
impossible.
exactly. And you had said trying to find or like filling out a run. Well, that wasn't necessarily my goal. I was planning on reading it all, but for as far as the collection goes, I would just get like issue, say like 95, and then I would get an issue 107, and then realize, oh, like I only have a few issues to like fill in this space. I should just do that. And so
Okay.
all of my collecting could just kind of happen by accident, in a way. And I just like have a pretty obsessive kind of like mindset and whatever hobbies I'm into, it's 100% that and no other thought. So
Yeah.
I was
I think
going
that's
after
how
it.
a lot of our brains work when it comes to that kind of stuff. It's hard to split the focus when you have that obsession.
Mhm. For sure, for sure.
At
Um,
least you were kind of narrowed down to a specific area. It sounds like you were mainly like an X-Men person. And did you find that as your love of the X-Men grew and you started with your collection and everything, did you start branching out and picking up other things and maybe, following some of the artists that you had seen on the X-Men to some of their other work and that type of thing?
a little bit like I would start to go out on John Burns stuff. So I was really into to his work, but I guess I just like it just didn't give me the same feeling as the X-Men run that I had always loved. And so I would collect a little bit outside of that or like other little things that I enjoyed like Flaming Carrot. I started to collect a little bit of that or um any other modern reads that I was doing like Sixth Gun was one that I collected for a little while. Um but as far as like branching off, I think I realized pretty quickly after starting to buy some of these other ones, Todd McFarlane Spider-Man, things like that. Um, I started going down these rabbit holes, and it was kind of maddening to realize that I'd never be able to own all of these comics that I wanted, right? Let alone in the condition that you would prefer. Um,
Yeah.
so it's just been an evolution uh, of what and finding out kind of testing what it is that I do like to collect and what
Yeah.
I'm okay with and what I just can't stand and need to move away from.
Now, for you, has it always been more about the story as opposed to the artwork, or kind of a little bit of both?
When I was younger, it was definitely the stories. I mean, sorry, definitely the art. The art was what
Art.
hooked me. So
Yeah.
Jim Lee's the way that he drew these like incredibly
Same.
masculine folks, and
Same.
it's just like it was just the perfect art for me, especially as a child. It was just so cool. And oh, like I also gravitated toward just slightly darker stuff because most of this kid consumable entertainment was, pretty light and friendly and bouncy. But as I was getting a little older, 10, 11 and stuff, I was wanting to seek out, something that's a little more, edgy.
Yeah.
And so Jim Lee's like, drawings were for hard, Um, but then later, I guess I kind of realized that I started to keep reading X-Men and I just didn't really like it. Later on in that Jim Lee run, I would pick up an issue and just be like, "What the hell's going on, dude?" Like,
Yeah.
and not to say that when I went back to Claremont writing, still, what the hell's going on? But
Yeah.
there's just a way of his writing and storytelling where I know there's going to be a payoff with it. Whereas I felt like I read so many other arcs that were just letdowns, or they set something up and you want to know about it, but they never readdress something. Or maybe I just didn't have the patience to continue after that.
Yeah.
So the stories definitely became more important to me. And then now, if I'm reading, like the only, I'll put up with a lot of different types of art. There's probably just like it has to be really bad for me to just, you know, just throw it out, right? But if the
Yeah.
story's good, that's all I care about. Similar to like video games these days, like I don't really need like something great graphics. Like if the fun ability is there, then bring it on.
Yeah, some of these little $3 games you can get on the Xbox Marketplace are amazing. My nieces were showing me that Stick Fighter game. Have
Oh,
you seen
sure.
that one? Yeah, they were like going nuts with that thing. They're like 7 and 10, 8 and 11, somewhere in there, that age range. Dang, now I'm gonna get in trouble. Not exactly remembering. I know they're just having birthdays here soon,
Oh,
so
sure. Right.
but they're in that age range, and yeah, they were having a ball with that side scrolling, just simple graphics, but it's
Yeah.
a fun concept, and yeah, definitely got them hooked.
Getting your money's worth out of that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You're rocking that Pong shirt too.
Yeah,
Classic,
I was just realizing, yeah, what a
classic
coincidence. Yeah.
Atari. Yeah,
So that is a
awesome
fun one,
stuff.
right?
Yeah,
Simple. But yeah,
simple's good.
keeping it simple has is definitely something that I look forward to when it comes to a lot of different like aspects of my entertainment, collecting, also video games. Like just like as an example, that's kind of the philosophy I've tried to take on when it comes to my collecting. It's like min-maxing. You familiar with that expression? Like with a role-playing game
Fairly,
character.
fairly, yes, yes.
So you have uh these different skill sets,
Yep.
strength, speed, dexterity, all these things and you have a certain amount of points that you can allocate to those skills. And by min-maxing, you're minimizing maybe two categories to maximize one category. And
Right.
you always have an edge in that respect. And when it comes to collecting or anything I'm interested in, I always want to be, you know, like a master at a certain thing because there's use for that. Whereas in my regular life, I feel like I'm good at a lot of stuff, but I'm not the best at anything, right? And I'm sure that way for everybody. But when I'm living a fantasy world, that's my hope is that I can focus on one aspect and just pour it all into that. So that's kind of what I'm taking on
Well,
right now,
I
with the
think
X-Men stuff.
you've achieved that with the X-Men stuff. I mean, looking at that wall behind you, you got a lot of cool stuff over
Oh,
there.
well, I appreciate that. I
Yeah.
feel a modest display compared to what we see from some of these other guys. But my
Oh,
wife was
they're
like, "Hey, you should have some comics
yeah,
behind you." So she
they're
got me these little like hooks to put up a few raw books. So I thought that
yeah,
was fun.
they're
Yeah.
everybody's out there flexing, putting all the
Right, right,
wall books up there and all the graded stuff and everything.
right.
I
Yeah.
notice I noticed Wolverine is pretty prominent in a lot of what you've got there. Is he your favorite X-Men character or one of your favorites?
Yeah, it probably comes down to the origin of my interest in the X-Men. It was just like I was saying before, looking for that edgy stuff, and Wolverine was the edgy one, and they really, made him a prominent role
Yeah,
in both the comics eventually, and definitely in the show. And so I go where I want to go kind of attitude
yeah,
was like always really, I thought, just badass. Um, Rereading some of the stuff that like he does, I'm kind of like, this guy's a creep. You know,
yeah, definitely.
and maybe I want to reassess like, who my favorite would be, but I
Yeah.
guess it's just I always fall
It's
back on
fantasy.
him.
It's fantasy, man. It's all good.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you, right? And so it's always been him. And then, Storm has been a close second, but I mean ultimately it's I always gravitate toward the Wolverine stuff.
Speaking of storms, I learned an interesting fact by one of my guests who was recently on. He's an artist that lives on Guam, and I did not realize that the creator of Nightcrawler lived on Guam for a period of time. And Nightcrawler was actually created, or he conceived of that character, came up with the idea during a storm while they were there on Guam, and that's how he came up with Nightcrawler. Was, I guess, during a storm or something. He
Oh,
had this idea, and yeah, so that's a little Easter egg for everybody out there listening that
oh
I
yeah,
didn't know.
I hadn't heard of that before. In my
Yeah,
mind,
yeah.
I guess I had just assumed it was the team of like Len Wein and Cockrum that
Yeah,
designed
no,
those characters.
apparently Cockrum lived on Guam for a little bit and he
Oh, was
came
it
up with
Cockrum that?
I believe that's what he said. Yeah.
Oh,
I'll have to go
interesting.
back and fact check myself, but I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure he said it was Dave Cockrum lived on Guam and came up with the concept of Nightcrawler there during a storm.
oh
So
wow.
that's like Guam's little character that they hold on to as a representation of Guam because of that. And I thought that was kind of neat because
Oh, that's really
the
cool.
superhero, the comic art scene there on Guam is fairly small, and there's not a lot of like artists who have made it big and stuff from Guam. So it was really interesting to hear. Yeah, for everybody that wants to check out that episode, it's Sonny Chargaloff, amazing artist. And yeah, you can fact check me on my statement I just made from memory about
That's cool.
Nightcrawler. Yes,
That's
sir.
cool. Nightcrawler is
Yeah,
definitely like an interesting kind of case study for the X-Men because he's ultimately one of those, looks like a demon,
yeah,
but on the inside, he's probably the most charming, morally
yeah.
focused characters, right?
Yeah, and he got to have his showcase there on the new X-Men animated series. He had a really cool
That
scene
eulogy,
there.
like yeah,
Yeah,
with him was blew me
so
away for
good.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah, what did you think of the new animated series? I thought it was pretty well done. It really picked up, and some of those scenes, man, that was breathtaking animation.
absolutely. The animation was just a little bit different. I really liked the way that they would show the tears in everybody's eyes. It was a drama,
Yeah,
and where I'm used to this being like an action show, but the comic is a drama. When you read it, it is just like that. It's maybe one action scene, but most of it is these characters interacting with each other and really showing, just like in every issue, showing who they are through their dialogue with each other and showing that their relationships with each other and where they stand out in the team, what they have to
yeah,
bring to the team. So this show, I felt like just captured the characters so well. It was incredible. And I don't watch a lot of the superhero media either.
Mm.
I'm around it and I hear what's going on, but I haven't really like all my other friends, I just I guess like the consumption of the superhero media has just kind of like faded for me, I guess. Though I do enjoy it when I watch it. It's
Yeah.
just
There's just so much now.
there's so much. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Who would have thought we would be at a point where we would complain about there being so much? It's like, man, if you had told me when I was a kid we would have all these movies and everything about these characters that we were loving in the comics, it would never have
Oh, I
believed
would
you.
never. I couldn't wait. I wouldn't be able to
Yeah.
wait for this stuff. And yeah, I think that it just comes down to I'm just like so spoiled, right? And I've always been like late to the party when it comes to new anything, new technology, new like I keep going back to these video game references, new systems, new games. I'll wait, new comic. I'll wait till something comes out and it's been reviewed and it's been read because I feel safe about knowing, okay, I can make this purchase and
Yeah.
this is going to be a good one.
That's been me with video game consoles.
Hmm.
I've always had an Xbox and a PlayStation, but I'm always like a generation behind. Like on my PlayStation, I'll wait and wait and wait, and then like, okay, I'll get it
Yeah,
now.
and they're going to
Like,
have a sale, like at some point.
yes,
So
yes.
yeah,
Shout out to Costco. You always have the bundle. They
and
get me
great.
with those bundles.
Yeah, yeah. You get that free game, that extra controller, great
Yeah,
return policy,
yeah,
so yeah, I dig it.
yeah. I'm a huge gamer too, a lifelong gamer. So you're speaking my language with
Oh,
the
right
game
on.
stuff as well.
Dude, I mean,
Yeah,
so many new games have come out. I feel like that I haven't
just
even
it's the same
haven't
thing. You can't keep up.
yeah. They're great and they're coming out with great stuff. It's
I have, I think I have like 5 games right now that I'm like halfway through.
dude, are you able to play a game? Speaking of like that hyper focus on like collecting or whatever you're doing, are you able to play a game and then switch to another game? Same thing with
I,
story reading. I cannot
I
switch from one
can,
story like and get a pull list of different
yeah.
titles and read them all. I have to stick with one, and just burn it through it.
I've been better recently about playing things through before jumping to something else because of the fact that I had so many partially played through games, and I'm like, or the new one would be coming out. It's like, oh, Spider-Man 3 is coming, or whatever the new Spider-Man is. I'm like, I need to finish the first one. So, so I worked my way through the first one. Then I started the Miles Morales one, and I'm trying to be better about it.
Okay, so it's like homework or a task for you, right?
Yes, yes, and I like make a rule for myself that I have to complete the one before purchasing the other, because at a point I had so many new games that I hadn't even played, and I would just get them, and then they would sit there, and
Hmm.
yeah, it was kind of a problem, but you have my ones I fall back on that I can switch back and forth. But for me, I have such limited free time that if I am gonna sit down and play something, it's kind of a short period of time, and I'm just wanting to get a little bit of enjoyment, relax, play. So kind of depends on what is suiting my mood
Sure.
of
Yeah.
the whatever time period I have to get on there. So I still get
Totally.
on that fight night for the Xbox 360, the boxing
Okay.
game,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I can get on that and play that for like 10 minutes and, do a couple rounds and have a good time and fulfill my gaming need for the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. That's kind of been like my, we can
Yeah.
jump in and jump out. That's what I may not like prefer it. Ultimately, I always love like the big, over the huge land creation and
Yeah.
action RPG style, but that's pretty much me too, that I have time for is
Yeah.
the short stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, how
I
you
feel
finding your
you.
time? You got
It's,
jujitsu, you're
dude,
drawing,
it's hard.
you
It's
got your own
hard. Yeah.
business to run.
Yeah. I think it's a matter of just making the time. For me with jujitsu, that was my hobby, which turned into my, over 21 years of teaching full time now, and over 28 years of training. So it's kind of a hobby that becomes your profession type of thing. So I've tried to maintain hobbies that aren't jujitsu related to have a little bit of an escape, even though jujitsu doesn't really feel like a job to me. Like the act of teaching jujitsu and training isn't a job, but the business side is definitely the part that you gotta give yourself some decompression time. So for me, my drawing and my, what little time I play video games, that type of stuff is, my non-physical hobbies that I actually can relax while I'm doing them. Yeah, so it's just time management, but sometimes it goes by the wayside.
Sure, yeah. Well, that's interesting to hear that you were able to do your hobby as a profession, and
Yeah,
not lose the love for it. I've always worried about diving too deep into something that I love as a career
right.
for the worry that it's going to become a job and I'm going to just try to get away from it.
Yeah. Yeah, the business side definitely feels like a job, from time to time, but yeah, I don't know. I've been fairly lucky in that regard that it's never really felt like a job to me. It's
That's
just
awesome.
something that I enjoy, and I love seeing how it has a positive impact on people's lives, the people I teach and everything. So for me, that's
Totally.
constantly fulfilling
Word.
in
Yeah,
that aspect. Yeah.
I dig it.
So for
Yeah.
your comics, like we've talked about you collecting, have you gotten into selling at all or trading? Like what are you doing these days with that collection? Is it just sitting there and accumulating, growing in size, or have you let anything go? Like what's your kind of approach with this?
Yeah,
Because I
that's a
know for
great
me
question.
personally, like I have a gigantic collection that's like ever growing, and I have the intention to start doing a little bit of selling, but man, it can be hard to let some of this stuff go.
And not only is it like hard to let that stuff go, it's hard to take the time to take the pictures, post it, or like think about where you're going to post it. Are you going to write a description?
Yeah.
How are you going to go about that? And then not to mention shipping if you're not used to any of that stuff. It can be a pain for sure. Like it's much 10 times more fun to buy stuff. And
Yes.
I'm still buying stuff. But yeah, like I think that I love goals, like setting goals and then moving along the path to achieve them. It's another, general hobby that I like to do. There's a lot of fulfillment in that, in working toward that goal and then looking back and go, wow, I did all that. So with the collection, I met some people that you know will encourage each other to get the collection that we've always wanted and envision a specific collection. And So I've been trying to like hone in on the books that I've always wanted, and in this case, it'd be I've always wanted a high grade giant size X-Men and a Hulk 181. Those are the books that
You got
you
the
know.
giant size back
I got the
February
giant size.
February of last year, right?
That's right. Wow,
See,
nice,
I know, I
nice call.
remember.
Yeah.
I remember
Um.
being excited for you because that's on
Uh,
my Grail list as well.
yeah. Yeah. So like I am still so stoked to have that because I mean on the inside it's signed by Dave Cockrum supposedly,
Yeah, yeah.
and but I believe that the cover is reglossed. I realized that after like a lot of different research. And it's probably like a very good copy, but I love it for what it is. It's a great copy to keep raw, and that's all I want to do with it. I want to keep that raw. I still want now I've realized like how much I love like a high grade book.
Yeah, it
Um,
gets
I s-
addicting. I held off on starting to get into the graded stuff here until recently, and it's like, oh man, this is like a snowball going
yeah,
downhill.
and a whole nother game for sure.
Yeah,
But without getting too far off track here, the to achieve that like that costs a lot of money, and I need a goal to get there, right? And I do have a lot of comics that I don't love as much as others, and I've always kind of had uh or not always, but over the last 15 years or so had the uh the taking on the philosophy of like the Marie Kondo, if you only
Yes.
keep it if you love it.
Does it
Um,
spark joy?
yes, yes, that's right. And I think that started around the time when me and my wife had moved to Korea for a couple of years to teach English. And before we did that, we had to get rid of a lot of our stuff and choose what we wanted to keep. And it's just kind of like liberating, to let go of things that you always, are almost like holding you back. Like, well, I can't do this because then I got to do that, or I got to move this, and there's so many comics I don't even want to get started. Um, but yeah, my process has been going through each one just like that. One comic and go like, do I love this? Like, do I get some sort of feeling when I flip through it, or do I like skip this section every time I flip through my books when I'm looking at them? And then just kind of realize like, what do I actually want? Writing them down on pieces of paper just to kind of reinforce that thought to make it real, and then physically separating those books of, okay, I don't need these anymore. Um, and then the things that I do really feel that I really do love, I kept in these other boxes. So that's more of an impulsive way I was able to separate them, and then recognizing that, okay, I can sell these or trade these up toward the books that I've always wanted. And and then there's like kind of a next step too, which I haven't been fulfilling, but it's just the imagining of the collection that I want in 10, 20 years. Rohan from he has a handle Back in the Game Comics, and he has a YouTube with JP, Absolute Game of Nerds, and they do like interviews and stuff. He taught me, or like he's helped coach me kind of in like in my goals and what I want out of my collection. So I envision what I want my collection to look like in 10, 20 years. And it's just a short box in my mind. If I just want a short box of everyone, just like an absolute banger, like or
Hmm.
like something that to me I'm like, oh, I love this, and oh yeah, the next one's even better than the last. Uh, because still I have this run that I am really proud of. But ultimately, I don't think I need these things. And also, somebody else had a quote. It was newsstand 99 newsstand Manu, who was saying that like he put out a clip or something from one of his um, talks with Dave West Coast Dave Venture, and he was
Yes,
saying
I
like,
had Dave on here
yeah,
recently.
yeah, that
Yeah,
was sick.
Dave's awesome,
Oh,
man.
for sure, that guy's great.
Yeah,
And just he had posed the question like, can we love something and not own it? Like, can we just love it from afar? Do we have to own everything? And
yeah,
that kind of, sparked a realization or like an epiphany or whatever that, I can still love all of these things, and I don't need them. Uh, and I think that that's the rationalization I give myself when I start to get frustrated, because it happens every once in a while with my collection,
yeah,
just thinking like, man, I worked so hard to get these comics, and it's quite a feat to have achieved all of this, yet I still feel like, when am I going to be satisfied? Um, it just gets kind of like, I get kind of meta with that stuff
yeah.
and philosophical about, what am I doing? Like it's, as much as I try to like to think that I'm like focused on stuff, I am all over the place, man. Like it feels like that anyway.
You and me both, my friend. You and me both. Hence the, comic collecting, art, jujitsu, arm wrestling,
Yes.
on and on. Yeah, video games. Like, we're all over the grid. I think it's just how our brains are wired. I noticed, like, people who collect, creative minded people, like, it's all like we hit on these same points almost every time I talk to them. I think
It's
it's
really
just
nice to hear.
wired into us. Yeah, it's completely, as far as I'm concerned, it's completely normal.
Yes, see, I need to hear that from you. I need that reinforcement to know that there's other people out there, like me, that
Yeah,
we work really hard. We're proud of what we have, and it, and so many people would love to have, a collection like the one that I have. So I feel really, almost like guilty sometimes too, right? Because it's like I come across some of these amazing comics, um and I want to make sure that they get appreciated,
Mhm.
for what they are.
So
So
for you, the any selling or trading, for you, if you get rid of something from your collection and you sell it, is that more of a means to an ends as far as, you're putting that money towards eventually getting something that you're going to add back into your collection?
absolutely. So
Yeah.
so I have a um like a graph that I keep. It's like the Google Doc.
Mm-hmm.
Or what is it? Like the Google, it's the little green sheet, whatever that is. But
Oh, like the
um
spreadsheet kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Their version of Excel.
that's what it is. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
use their version of Excel to track all of my purchases and my sales. So that I, know where how much money is coming in and coming and going out. And so I have a total there at the bottom. I just keep adding lines as I'm selling or buying more stuff. So I'm building up that stack right now to get that Hulk 181 or the giant size X-Men.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you about that if you had the Hulk 181 yet, because
Yeah.
that's like my huge Grail thing, and I almost pulled the trigger on one at Washington Summer Con.
Yeah, I heard
I
that's a
went,
great show. Yeah.
man, it was an amazing show. It's grown so much, and they had like really big name artists there, like Ryan Otley was there, Frank Cho,
So
like
sick. Show's
Jim
got some really
Shooter
cool
was
stuff. I
there.
Oh, Shooter. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Shooter was there. Jim Starlin was there. Like
Wow.
they had a bunch of big name people there, and a ton of like celebrities, like big name celebrities. So that
Yeah.
was pretty crazy.
Well, forgive me if you shared the story, but I want to hear this almost Hulk
Oh,
181 story.
so well, I kept seeing like a bunch of booths had them, and then I was looking at this other booth, and I had asked the guy how much the copy he had on the wall was, and if it was complete, like if it had the value stamp and all of that.
Because it was raw,
And
I
then
assume.
yeah, that was a raw one, and then he goes, "Oh yeah," he goes, "I got a." He's like, "What?" What grade range are you looking for, and what are you looking to spend? And he like walks over and hands me like a stack of 8 of them. He's just like, here, he's like, I've got a bunch of them. He just
Pick your
pulls them out of a
card.
long
Yeah.
box. Yeah. And so I was very, very tempted. But then I realized, like, in not to say, like, he was priced pretty fair, but it is very overinflated right now because of the movie, like, because of
Sure.
Wolverine being in the Deadpool movie.
Mhm.
So I decided to hold off, but that was the most copies of it I held in my hands. Like
That is so
actually had it
cool.
that close to me, because I had asked to see the one on the wall, and I looked at that, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, I've got a bunch more here." And I'm like, "Oh my god!" And I told my wife, and like that was really tempting,
Oh
because
man, I
he
bet.
had them ranging anywhere from a grand up to 5,000, 10,000. Like he had a
Wow.
bunch of high grade copies, and
Really a,
yeah,
a copy for anyone, for everyone.
yeah. And I
Wow.
was like, man, I'm gonna be patient. I'm gonna wait, because part of me wants to get that one. I actually want like a CGC graded copy. I think is probably what I'll end up doing. But sometimes when you see the raw ones and they're in really good shape and the price is good, it's like, oh man, so
Sexy.
tempting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I understand wanting the grade, especially like in that price range, the assurance,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
seeing
And
the
I don't think that's one like I'm gonna be too afraid to like open it up and flip through it. Like even if I did have a raw one,
sure.
I would check it to make sure everything was in place, and then it would be sealed up for the rest of the time more
Yeah,
than
yeah.
likely. So I'm like, if I'm not gonna be, taking it out like a reader copy, I might as well get a graded one. 'Cause
Yeah, I
that thing,
agree.
I don't see that ever going down in value. Not that I have the idea of selling it if I do get it, but with graded stuff, especially the CGC stuff and in certain Grail books like that, they just seem to keep increasing in price over time.
Yeah.
It's
I
really
mean, you want to protect your, even though we may not look at this as an investment, in a way, we just want to make sure that we're making a smart purchasing decision, and we're
yeah,
not
especially when
fleecing
you're getting
ourselves.
into those thousands of dollar
Oh
books
yeah.
like that.
Oh yeah. It's like I am nervous to pull the trigger, and I feel like anytime I've made, there's a threshold where you start to feel like nervous about making a purchase. Like I can make a
Yeah.
$20 purchase all day, whatever,
Oh,
you know.
easy. Too easy. Yeah.
Then it became $100 purchase. I was, you know, I'm a little more comfortable with $100 purchase. Multi-$100 purchase, not so comfortable. You know, like that's when I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to test this out and practice. Like I'm asking people, you know, hey, give me the code on that the CGC verification code, or let me see some more pictures. Could you do this much? You know, and I don't know if I'm actually ready to buy it. I just want the practice of negotiating or like talking just
Yeah.
to get that idea in my head. Okay, this is how many people will sell this grade for this much. Just so that I feel more confident when I am ready to purchase.
Yeah. And with the CGC stuff, like with the graded books, like it got scary after that whole thing
Oh
with
yeah,
the
yeah.
fakes, you know, it was like, oh man, now I got to be even more doing more research to make sure I'm actually getting a legit one
That's
that
right.
somebody
Yeah.
hasn't reholdered and done all that stuff to it. Because when it came out, like just how easily they were doing that and how long it had been gotten away with, it's like, oh man, how many things do people have out there that aren't legit?
For sure. Like that when
Yeah.
that had happened, it was for me, I think I felt I recognized that we were kind of in this Instagram and YouTube like echo chamber when it comes to comic collecting. We all see the same people, we all hear the
Yeah.
same voices or people repeating what we've heard. And I feel like it's probably, you know, a big deal, but at the same time, perhaps we're inflating how large spread it may be. But
Yeah.
then again, it's definitely information that we can use moving forward to be cautious and careful. It's
Yeah.
a good reminder that these things do happen. And but for one thing, I always get sketched out when I see the Hulk 181 with the custom label. Like
Yeah.
I'm always like, wait a minute, you know, I need to look
Yeah.
into this a little bit more. There's always hesitancy with that.
Yeah, I mean, before all that stuff happened, it was just like you felt that assurance, like, oh, I can look up the number and check it in the database
As long as
and
it's
all of
there,
this.
you
As
know,
long
yeah,
as it's there, it's legit. And then
yeah,
it's like, wait a second,
yeah,
somebody got tricky. They figured it out.
yeah.
Everybody, you know, eventually they figure out a way to hack the system.
Right, yeah. Make learning to grade a lot more important, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and just being, you know, it did give people an idea of more tools to be able to do some homework too, and like looking up the pictures and oh, wait a second, that one's clearly different than the
Oh
than the
yeah,
one they're selling. Like, wait, what happened here? Like
it's
there were some people
amazing.
that did some great detective work that
It's
figured all
exactly
that
what I
out.
was. Yep, yep,
Yeah.
100% for sure. And it was
So
interesting.
for
Oh, go ahead.
oh,
Go ahead.
go, no, you're good. Go ahead. Keep going.
I was gonna bring it back to when you had mentioned about almost buying your Hulk 181 at the
Yeah.
convention. You had said like the thing that stopped you was you thought about the timing. You thought, okay, this Wolverine movie's coming out. It wasn't necessarily like, okay, I'm looking at the statistical analysis of where the prices have been, and it's in line with 2019
Yeah.
prices. It wasn't any of that. It was just hey, typically speculation is ramped up right before this, and this is when comic prices are their highest. Right? Am I right
Yep.
about that? Okay. Yeah, that's
100%.
valid. Valid.
And then the other thing, the little devil over here, he told me, he goes, even though it's not rumored at all, what if Hulk shows up in the movie?
Dude,
And
I
then you're
heard there
gonna,
was a
and
rumor
then you're,
today
see,
about
and
that.
then you're gonna
Yeah.
regret that you didn't get it because actually nobody knows, but Hulk's gonna show up, and then you're gonna be mad that you don't.
Dude,
Yeah,
dude,
this is the battle.
there was this rumor that came out today about that, and my friend Bruce from Up North Comics, he on Instagram and YouTube it, he bought a Hulk 181 within an hour after hearing that
Yeah,
news. Because he was already
see,
targeting it, but
yeah,
that news made him, be like, I'm pulling the trigger now.
yeah.
He got a
And
good deal,
now, like
but
now, I bet if I get on there, they're all like skyrocket.
maybe, yeah.
They're gonna be like 20 copies on there marked up for double what they're worth.
For sure. I mean,
Just like the Dazzler thing. I mean that issue of Uncanny X-Men, that was people buying that for crazy amount.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean it's still really high up there.
Yep, and Lady Deadpool first
That's
appearance
right.
and Dogpool first appearance. Like
That's right.
anything to do with that movie is like on fire right now. All the even the Liefeld, issues of Deadpool with Wolverine and
Oh, for
everything, the
sure.
Wolverine issues that he did, like all that stuff is through the roof right now.
Yeah.
It's really cool to see though, because I think that movie is going to kind of reignite a lot of people's passion for the comic book movies. And from what I've heard, it's going to kind of be almost like a hard reboot.
Yeah, it does seem
Yeah.
like that, and I'm hopeful as well that's what's going to happen, and
It's
I
the
think
first
that's
one I've been like super excited for in a
me too.
long time. I'll say that, like, since like Endgame, Infinity War, it's kind of the first one that I'm like that excited for. So
Yes, yeah, I agree with that. This is the one thing that I'm just giddy to like. I could go by myself to the theater and just really enjoy it. So definitely
yeah,
that I'm right there in that boat. So and I'm pretty sure that it will be, but I think that most people are also expecting that. So you know when we have these high expectations,
yeah,
if it doesn't deliver even even if it's close, but it doesn't quite match the hype, then I guess I'm trying to just temper my
yeah.
expectations
Me
because I've been
too.
burned, you know,
Yeah,
and I've fallen into the FOMO, back a couple of years ago, and I'm trying to learn from that.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, there's somebody that said one of the collectors, or God, it might be somebody famous in the community, but they basically just said buy what you love.
mm,
Like, don't get too caught up in all, all of this stuff. Like, at the end of the day, if it's something like going back to the Marie Kondo, like if it sparks joy and it's something you love, it doesn't matter if everybody else likes it, or even if it's necessarily a comic that's worth a lot of money. If it brings joy to you, ultimately, to me, that's what collecting is about. So I try to
definitely.
not get too wrapped up in value and grade and all of that. Like, I'll take a nice low grade copy of something that I really love. Like, I don't
Yeah.
mind. I like still have it. Like, to me that's cool, especially when it
For
comes to the older stuff.
Oh, for
Like,
sure.
I'm a huge Jack Kirby guy. Like, I've gained a huge appreciation for Jack Kirby's art over the past couple of years. So now I'm like everything Kirby. Like, that's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to fill in. And some of that stuff, it's hard to get in decent shape.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So I have
Dude,
it, but a
Kirby's.
lot of them are really beat up. Like, but I still have them.
I mean that there's such a coolness factor to just owning it. That
Yeah.
uh, you know, like I hear there's the new or an expression that's new to me, which was like buy once, cry once, right? I never heard
Oh
that
yeah.
before, but apparently, like it makes sense when you're going after a specific high grade kind of a comic. You're holding
Yeah.
out until you have enough money to buy that big one. But
Yep.
man, when I'm seeing my friends' collections, and I'm seeing that they have this book, that book, I don't care, and I don't know if it's a very good or a very fine,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter. It's just damn, my friend has that book. That is
Yep.
rad. So I
Yeah.
definitely I definitely dig that. Like that
Well, and the whole like grade thing is so subjective too.
for
It's like
sure.
what pair of eyes are looking at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like
Because I see some of the stuff that I have that's like a 7 or a 7.5, and it looks like perfect. I'm like, how did that get a set? Like, I just got the Avengers, the first appearance of Vision graded in a 7.5, and it looks like, to me, it looks like a 9.
yeah,
But something about it, when it was graded, it got a 7.5.
for sure. And there can be 7.5s that kind of look, you know, really bad. Like, or there's
Yeah.
a corner missing. It could still, grade
Yeah.
out like that. And so it's just, yeah, it really does come down to just like what are we going to be fulfilled with at and what are we comfortable spending? And
That's the big one.
every comic is a little different with the flaws. What you're willing to accept is different, and what the seller is willing to accept as a price from you is different. So it's like I love the variability of this all too, like of how to collect,
Yeah.
and it's so fun. to see.
Now, is a lot of your collection facilitated, or maybe that's the wrong word, purchased via local sellers there, like shops and things, or do you purchase a lot from some of the online, the more reputable online sellers? Do you ever get on Facebook Marketplace, that kind of stuff? Like me, I'm like looking everywhere. Trying to find, and of course supporting people like West Coast Dave and stuff, because I know he's a reputable guy, and
Definitely.
same with Ryan, the Colossus Collector. And it's always feels good when you can put some money towards the way of your friends that are doing the thing that they love as well. So
Yeah, I
for
dig that.
you, are you just kind of like dipping your toes in everywhere and in surfing the web looking for those hot deals?
I am surfing the web looking for the hot deals. I would say like I'm always like just kind of in the shadows, like with I wish that I could expand where I buy from. But really just buy from eBay. I've always
Yeah.
just done that, and I do buy from occasionally from sellers on like Instagram, but it's fairly rare. And we also have a lot of um local comic book shops around town in Portland. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah, Portland, you guys got a lot of cool shops down there.
Pretty spoiled, yeah, over
Yeah.
here. And but then again, like I still, even though I love to go to them just to flip through their back issues, I know what I want, and any of the things that like the high grade X-Men that I'm looking for, they're going to be like really expensive. And I know that eventually, because they're very common, a deal will end up coming my way as long as I'm diligent and checking
Yeah.
the way that, because I have like, you know, this tool that I use, I know how to use that one well. And I just kind of always go back to that. I'm a creature of habit, so I tend to
Yeah.
just do that. And going to the store, the comic shops, it is fun to flip through the stuff, but I don't enjoy digging looking for a deal, um, because that's not really my lane. Like I don't know the prices on top of my head, and I hate having to like I'm not gonna be looking on my phone.
Right, right.
I just feel maybe I'll
Yeah.
go to the car later and do that, but
Right,
but I
right.
feel like really weird about doing that right there, and so I just kind of just like stick to the comics that I know and that I know by heart about the price that I'm willing to pay for them. And so I'll just kind of refresh my saved search on eBay for the most part.
Yeah.
And I've gotten, really lucky sometimes.
Yeah, I
Um,
think the majority of stuff I've grabbed has been off of eBay as well. I did a little bit with the sellers on Instagram and YouTube, and never got burned on YouTube, but there was one Instagram. I did get scammed once,
oh,
most recently, and I kind of learned my lesson on that. Like I knew I had a
yeah.
gut feeling, like the way the guy was talking. I'm like, this is too good to be true. Something's off here.
Uh-huh.
The way things are worded is a little sketchy, and I should have gone with my gut.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I was only out like $30.
Okay.
But still,
Okay.
it's like
That's
at
a
least
cheap
it wasn't
lesson.
$1,000 book or something. But
Dude.
yeah, so now I'm a little leery. I have a few like Instagram sellers that I really trust, who I've done business with in the past, and
Yeah.
know that they're legit because they're supported by other people in that community.
Hmm.
But yeah, it can be tempting because sometimes you see like these crazy good deals, and it kind of goes to the, if it's too good to be true, it probably is type of thing.
Oh yeah.
And it was yeah, I got burnt, but thankfully again it was like a $30 book,
Yeah.
not a $2,000 book or something.
Yeah, that's fortunate. Yeah, to be
Yeah.
scammed like that. And I've had issues with sellers on eBay. It was rare, but I did, and it was so easy to return or refund that,
Yeah.
I've never really been burned. The burnedest that I've gotten was just like basically agreeing to something or paying for something that I didn't really want, and then
Yeah.
just kind of knowing afterwards, having a little remorse, but just taking it because that was what I agreed to, and trying to learn the lesson from that. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I really do need to focus on what I want and not just what is maybe just a good deal. There's
Yeah.
so many good deals right now.
Oh, it's
It's
crazy.
hard to not buy. Like, this is the
Yeah.
accumulation phase, so we need to do that.
Yeah. I just
Um,
have to make sure I don't go and look on there.
what do you
If I
mean? Oh,
go and
go. Oh,
if I
just to
go if
see
I
what's for
go if I
sale.
because if I go browse eBay right now, I'll be not good. The
It
PayPal balance is gonna plummet.
it's addicting. Like it.
Yeah.
I'll have my wife even tell me like, "Do you really need to? Like,
Mm,
we're transitioning to the car to go somewhere. Do you need to check that right now?" Like, no.
my wife, it sounds like your wife is pretty supportive as well with our habits, our addictions, with
Yeah.
these collections. My wife likes to remind me that so as part of the process of the Nerdy Musings podcast and everything, that all stems from a business that her and I started, both for her to sell her art and for me to sell some collectibles. So we started another business earlier this year, and part of what I want to do with that business is sell some comics. So I've been accumulating more comics, and she's like, "Wait a moment." Wasn't the idea to have this business and sell
I
comics,
need
not be?
inventory, honey. I need.
That's what I
Yeah.
said. She's
Yeah.
like, "You've got plenty of inventory." No, that's the stuff I want to keep. I got to get this stuff to sell.
Oh man. Yeah,
So
dude.
far,
Yeah.
nothing has been sold, and a lot of stuff has been
It's
accumulated, but
yeah.
the intention is there.
Yeah. And eventually, like, yeah, that's a motivator for me too. Like, just knowing that, understanding how hard it is to get stuff listed and get stuff sold. It's a lot of work, and
Yeah.
I don't want to do that when I'm 80 or whatever. Like, I know that I'm not going to want to, because I've talked to enough older people who also collected, and they all end up selling it all.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not worried about getting less money for it as much as I am like the burden of feeling like, man, I really gotta get rid of this, and then doing the work then. It's
Yeah.
backbreaking, like moving long boxes around.
Yeah.
So man, hats off to guys like Dave,
No
who do
kidding.
this as a for a living, and
Yeah.
he's such a killer dude. Like,
He is.
I've never actually bought from him either. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, it like I
I
feel
hadn't
a little
I
bad about.
yeah, well, I've got to see him in person a couple of times. So I haven't bought from him online, but in person a couple
Yeah.
of times I've
Oh,
bought a few
cool.
things from him.
Oh, really? In person?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow. Right.
he was at a little small comic book vendor thing they did at this coffee shop over in Tacoma,
Mm.
Washington, and that's when I first met him in person. I'd chat with him a little bit online prior to that, but then at SummerCon he had a big booth, and
Oh, cool.
he brought Kirby stuff for me because he knew like I love Kirby stuff. He's like, "Hey, there's all this Kirby stuff for you to look at," and I was like, "Oh man." So I
Oh,
ended
that's
up
awesome.
supporting Dave quite a bit.
Yeah, I gotta throw some money at him for sure, because he's just
Yeah,
just in the entertainment value alone, like
yeah.
he's I learned so much from him. So yeah, like I definitely want to give back to guys like
That
him, and
was
like,
my big FOMO thing. He had the first day of SummerCon at his booth, print, a big Captain America print that was actually signed by Jack Kirby.
no way.
Yeah, and they were only asking 500 for it, and I was like, if that's still there tomorrow, I'm gonna get it. And it wasn't there the second day, and I was like, oh
I'm
man.
guessing you didn't pull the trigger then, because it's more fun to have the money walking around the con.
Yeah,
With you got the
yeah.
power, but
Yeah.
and you,
And at the
yeah,
end of the day, I'm happy with that decision because I got a ton of the books I was looking for. And had I bought the print, I would not have been able to get those. So it's that trade-off, right?
yes, it's you have to
Yeah,
make a trade off every time, right? We're out there
you
because there's
do.
there's so much cool
Yeah.
stuff that we want, and then are you going to go after that one big thing that you're really proud of, or several other things that together they make an awesome team of a collection?
Yeah.
It's tough.
It is tough. For you, who's your favorite X-Men artist that you can think of off the top of your head? Do you have one? Like
Yeah.
you're like trying to say it before I even finish. Like, yeah, I could tell it's about ready. Who's your favorite X-Men artist?
There is like a little nuance to it.
Okay.
But it's John Byrne and it's Dave Cockrum.
Yeah.
And then I would also throw Jim Lee in there just because he hooked me.
It's hard
Uh,
not to. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, it's I feel like a little a bit of a poser because like it is such a common answer to go with those guys. Those guys are the original um the original hook grabbers of
Yeah.
the audience. But it's just that's just when I imagine in my head what the X-Men look like. It's one variation of that team there. Uh, so yeah, that would be it. There are other artists that I do really enjoy that
Yeah.
that wrote for the for X-Men or related, like Art Adams and Barry Windsor Smith are a couple guys that I really enjoyed their stuff. Um, and but like and I used to be definitely like more on the wanting to follow the artists and
Hmm.
collect. For example, like I still want a John Byrne signature. I know that they're out there, but I'm just kind of waiting for the right moment. But I'm also
Yeah.
like not a big signature guy. I guess maybe because I never owned a signature before. Like I never actually um met the artists to get anything signed. So maybe it's just my coping mechanism to like I'm
Yeah.
jealous, so I think like, oh, I never into that anyway. But no, I like it. It adds value to me, even if I didn't meet the the person who signed it. It's still cool um, to
Oh,
show that.
definitely.
It just feels
Yeah.
cool. But this summer in a couple months, I guess I'm gonna go to Terrificon to meet some of my online friends that I met that strong armed me into going, and that should be a lot of
Nice.
fun. Well, I'm gonna meet Claremont there and get something signed. I have no idea what,
Yeah.
but just
That'll
because
be
it'd
part
just
of the
be
fun.
yeah, just part of the
Deciding.
just want to
Yeah.
talk to him and see him in real life and just be there you are
Yeah.
and right, like have a personal experience with the people who created these characters that I love.
Were you ever a fan of Silvestri's work
Oh,
on
for sure.
Uncanny?
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
I just found a stack of those, and I keep finding all these comics hidden in my house that I didn't realize I had. Like my
Wow.
wife found a tote full of comics in our storage room. She's like, "What are these?" I'm like, "I don't remember these, but yeah, oh, I remember that." And then there was a ton of Silvestri and Jim Lee, like older Uncanny X-Men in there. I'm like, "Oh, sweet."
Oh,
So
so cool.
yeah, I was flipping through those, and it kind of reignited. Because I've always loved Silvestri's stuff, but I forgot how great his stuff was on those old X-Men books.
Oh, for
It's like
sure.
super powerful. Like it wasn't as heavily rendered as he is nowadays. So it was kind of, you could see more, that's the trade off with rendering sometimes. Like it can take away if it's too much. So
Mhm.
I like seeing like artists earlier in their career, like same with Jim Lee, like his stuff on those Uncanny books was just really killer in my opinion. Like, don't get me wrong, I love all Jim Lee stuff, but seeing that older stuff is like you forget like the feelings you had when you first saw that.
Oh yeah, and you can see the evolution of their art style.
Yeah.
Like some folks will really hone in on a specific style, while you may see others just kind of feel like it just falls apart, or like, oh wow, they must have been asked to do a lot because it feels really
Yeah.
rushed. Whereas maybe some of their earlier work felt very detailed and
Yeah.
uh,
Well, seeing the art the way it was colored back then too, I find that the digital coloring nowadays, like I actually was just listening to episode of Rob Liefeld's
oh
podcast. he
cool.
he has a Patreon now, so on the Patreon he releases episodes of the podcast, but they're completely different than the ones he puts out on Apple and Spotify and all that, to where he's talking about like the process, like the art process, which for me as somebody who draws is like, I'm geeking out over it.
Yeah.
And he was talking about why a lot of people's work nowadays looks the same. It looks very similar. And he was talking about like how everybody's using digital and people are doing like this deadline around things that's very, you know, no variation in thin and thick. And then the way things are colored, like people are actually going in and leaving a lot of room for the colorist to do a lot of the work and like sculpt the form and everything. And
true.
So in the old days, like you're looking at those books with the way they did coloring back then, like it doesn't take away from the art as much as I think it does a little bit nowadays, which I get it. Like their colorist is saving the artist quite a bit of work. Like the artist is not necessarily having to render as much, so they are able to produce more. So, and same with digital, like they're able to do things quicker and produce more. So I get it, but it was interesting looking back at that old stuff and just realizing like how much more of the art you could see without all the heavy rendering with the digital sculpting as it would be now with the coloring.
For sure. The colors in modern comics, I feel like, have been just incredible. They're not only are they so vibrant but you're right, like the colors sculpt the art. You can actually see, you know, the muscle definition through the colors rather than the black lines and the, you know, the detailed work that guys like you know, Liefeld or McFarlane or Jim Lee would put into their, you know, all those image guys, like from, you know,
all the image guys,
like
speaking my language,
core,
all the guys I came up on.
yeah, for sure. I mean, those guys were rock stars, right?
You talk about over rendering. It's definitely
for sure.
Throwing lines where there would be no lines, but it still looked cool, and it got us all us young guys all hooked on it.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, I dig it. It's and Liefeld's, I haven't heard his podcast, but from what I hear from other people, there's so many great stories and insights in there. And as much as he can rub a lot of people the wrong way, because he's opinionated and he had, you know, a certain artistic style, or like he's very defensive, you know, about the shit that he gets. I mean, who wouldn't be if they got trolled like he does? But I mean, he has value to the medium, and he has a lot of insight and story, and it's interesting to hear that perspective.
Yeah, it really is. I gained I gained more of an appreciation for him after starting to listen to his podcast, because I had a certain opinion or a certain, like I liked back in the day because I didn't know as much what I was looking at. Like I loved all that old X-Force stuff and Youngblood and all of that. Then as I got more into art and you start seeing the anatomical errors, or maybe it's not even an error, maybe he's choosing to be more stylistic and do things incorrectly, because a lot of artists have done that. It's like you have to know what's a saying I like, you have to be able to command the ordinary, you have to be able to master the ordinary before you can command the extraordinary. So a lot of these guys like Jack Kirby, like tons of stuff wrong with his anatomy and everything else, and then you look at his stuff from the 40s and he's able to draw a perfect figure, a perfect face, everything is correct, and then you're like, oh, he's doing an interpretation, like he's being impressionistic and doing all this crazy stuff because he's choosing to. And then I've seen stuff that Rob has done where you're like, wait a second, like he can actually draw a portrait, like that looks really good, what's going on here? And so it makes you wonder how much of it is like getting the work done and choosing to do things a certain way that gets interpreted by people like myself. They're like, oh, that's really poorly drawn. But then you're like, well, wait, like, is it exciting? Like, there are people that like it? Well, and then hearing his passion about Comics is what really got me in the podcast. Like, this guy truly loves what he's doing.
Oh, for sure. He's passionate.
And he has a body of work, like whether the quality is where people like or the art style is what people like that guy has done thousands upon thousands of pages, created. You can't argue with the fact how popular a lot of the characters he created are. So for me, like, all, perceived faults aside or way people feel about him, I gained a more of an appreciation listening to his podcast, and I feel like getting to know a little bit more of what makes him tick through listening to that. So it's been really interesting to kind of go full circle to Rob Liefeld fan as a younger guy, kind of not so much of a fan coming up, and then now back to, I really like this Rob Liefeld guy and what he's doing. So I kind of felt conflicted a little bit, but I love it. I love the Robservations podcast. It's been awesome.
That's what it's called, Robservations.
Yeah, you got to listen to it.
I should give it
actually,
a shot.
Yeah, because at first I was like, oh, Rob Liefeld podcast, I don't know. And then I'm like, holy crap, this guy really, like, one, knows what he's talking about, knows his comic history, and he's just so damn passionate about all of it, and still producing comics after all these years. And that's very admirable, because a lot of these guys aren't doing it anymore. Like, who can McFarlane hasn't drawn a page in how many years? Like, Eric Larson's one of the few that is still doing it. Like, Silvestri put out that Batman book, but he'd been working on that for over a decade. Like, that's crazy to think. Like, he took literally, I think it was 10 years ago, he was showing people pages from that.
Wow.
And that just came out. So.
Yeah. It's a lot of work, I would imagine.
Tons of work, especially with that rendering.
Yeah, you made a great point there about the Jack Kirby style, or really any of these artists. Like, when the new artist comes on the scene writing a book, I feel like they always have to. Maybe this is just a Marvel or a DC thing, or taking over a title, but you have to mimic the last artist, so that the reader isn't too confused. Okay.
Yeah, you don't jar. Don't jar them too much. Yeah.
And then eventually, once they establish themselves as hey, I'm a legitimate artist, I can draw things my way. And as absurd as some of the art, the meme art that maybe Liefeld has come out with, it evokes an emotion. And what is that if not art?
Exactly. Right? Yeah. And the bottom line is there's something out there for everybody, right? So
for sure.
None of us has to feel obligated to like any art that we don't like, but we also should not demean people who like stuff that we don't.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
Awesome, Dan. Well, listen, I feel like we could just continue this conversation probably indefinitely, but
I could.
I know it's getting into the evening, and I appreciate you taking a little bit of time with me here today. I think it'd be cool to get both you and Colossus Collector on here at some point. We'll do a trio.
My Canadian brother there.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, I am going to hit this outro. Hang out with me for a moment.
For sure.
Everybody out there, hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you go like, subscribe, review. You can watch this podcast, the video version, on YouTube at Nerdy Mewzings, and that's Mewzings. If you look that up on YouTube or any of your favorite audio podcast platforms, it'll show up. Giving it a review definitely helps us out, helps get more exposure, and make sure that you can hear more awesome guests like Mr. Dan here of DansXmenComics. So until next time, everybody, keep it nerdy.